Welcome back to Right Media Group Chronicles. Today, I'm joined by Andrew Ballard, President of Marketing Solutions. Andrew is a veteran in this space, 35 years of experience. He has worked with hundreds of organizations from startups to Fortune 500. He is also a TEDx talker and the author of the brilliantly titled book, Your Opinion Doesn't Matter. Andrew, great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Boy, I should take you on the road with me. You introduce me better than I introduce me. I want to
Thank
meet
you.
this person you're talking about.
Take us back, Andrew. You founded Marketing Solutions in 1997. So, what really made you leave the corporate world and start your own firm? I mean, as we clarified previously, you have a wealth of experience in different industry. I mean, you were even a drummer back in the day, and your dad owned an agency as well. So, I'm sort of wondering, what was your journey like? What led you to founding an agency?
Well, both my parents were in advertising, and so I was kind of indoctrinated at a young age. I got into media first, broadcast, and that was back in 1984. And I kind of started as a green pea at the smallest market station, and within about a year and a half, I ended up at the largest market station here in the Seattle area in the United States. What specifically to your question gave me the confidence to leave corporate and start my own company. Having experience in marketing, media, advertising, lots of different areas under that larger marketing umbrella, I really didn't like the culture of the industry or the way that they operated. Everything that the typical ad or marketing agency did, in my experience, was to worry about their own margin and to drive success for the agency. And I thought that was bass backwards. And so when we launched I launched Marketing Solutions with my business partner, my best friend, and my wife. We've been together for 36 years. She puts up with me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But we did it because we thought we could do it better. And 28 years later, evidently we were right. The point is that we're focusing on our client's margin. And our thought is if we focus on what's best for our client, things will go really well for our agency. And of course, near the end of our third decade, that worked out.
Talking a little bit about your book titled Your Opinion Doesn't Matter, that is sort of a bold statement. Would you mind to give us a summary and what exactly do you mean by the title?
Sure. My wife actually named the book, and the book's a dinosaur. It published 15 years ago. Um, but she's been hearing me say for over 30 years in business, when I meet with a potential client for the first time, I'm always saying to them, unless you're ready to buy up all your own inventory, your opinion doesn't matter to me. It's your customer's opinion because they vote with their checkbook. And that's, colloquial. That's really old. Nobody's got a checkbook anymore. Everything's Venmo or whatever. But the point is, I was trying to share with folks that it's really about the market, what the market data is telling us, voice of the customer, competitive intelligence, etc. And about 9 out of 10 founders, owners go, yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. And I want to meet our prospects where they are to convert them into clients. And the 10% that says, nope, it's my way or the highway, I give them the phone number of a competitor because I'm not going to work with them. They're too inwardly focused, and we need to be driven by demand dynamics, not supply.
You mentioned something very incredible last time we spoke on our pre podcast chat. You said something about business owners struggle to separate their own ego from what the market actually wants. Can you dive a little bit more deeper?
Well, especially with entrepreneurs, people that are launching something, it's really, everybody thinks it's based on time and money. And of course, the opposite is true. You want more time, you want more money. Maybe starting a business isn't the best way to get there, at least in your early stage. But the point is that they have tremendous passion for what they're doing. And like me, they think they can do it better than the industry. And so they have so many of them. As I said, 9 out of 10 are pragmatic enough to go, oh, yeah, I get it. I need market intelligence to drive strategy, which is, our assertion. But there are some folks that, I started this, I know the industry, nobody knows the company better than I do, and I'm better prepared. So I don't want you to come to me with strategy. I want you to help me implement. That's typically what we might hear when the ego takes over common sense.
Talking specifically about your own growth in your agency, you have been in the business for decades. How does marketing solutions get clients today? What sort of sources or channels bring the most clients? Or I'm guessing at this point they sort of come to you, so it's more inbound rather than outbound.
Yeah, in our 28th year, in fact, for the last 15 years, 95, 97% of our clients come to us. And it's either through a client referral or a vendor referral, most frequently. People that have worked with us and know that our system, which is detailed in the book, really works. For us, it's all about generating a significant net ROI. If they're going to invest, 100 grand in something, we want them to get a net ROI of 400% or a $500,000 after you pull the investment out. So it's really about people coming to us now. When we started, I got some really good advice when I left corporate and we hung out our own shingle. And that was launch your business, whether you call it an agency or a consulting practice, it doesn't matter. The same applies to either direction that you're going. That is, launch your company with a client in your pocket. Don't start with zero revenue coming in. And I had been the CEO of a company, a good sized company, and I had a lot of relationships, including board members. We were private. We were not publicly traded, but we had a board. I mean, every time I'd have a board meeting, I'd leave with more brain cells. These were really smart people I was only 35 when I became a CEO for the first time. And so I needed a lot of hand holding. And fortunately, my board, great mentors. So yeah. And then it's really, my advice to any agency owner is, if you really want to get to the point where you're not having to sell all the time to fill your pipeline, it's under promise, over deliver, and just completely delight your customers, because not only will the engagement extend, but they will be saying really positive things, about you, and it can go pretty quickly. And then the rest of it was just looking for opportunities. I have a technique that I teach that it's called plausible cause. It's a sales technique that goes, decades and decades back. And that is, if I'm meeting it, like say, I'm in Seattle and I'm in a high rise meeting with a client, and then across the hall, I'll see another business that I believe is in an industry that we can really help. I'll just walk in and say, I don't really have time to talk with the owner or the decision maker, but we've got a client across the hall and we've done a lot of work in your industry. I just want to trade cards. And that usually works really well. I'll get the card of the decision maker. If you're saying, I want to meet the decision maker, the gatekeeper will say, nope, because they're, she or he are
Yeah.
trained to block anybody from accessing the boss. So plausible cause. I was just across the hall. We have a client. It just kind of establishes some instant credibility, especially when you say, we have a lot of experience in your vertical.
Of course, no, very important. I do love a good sales strategy as well. So maybe we can dive into that a little bit deeper later on. You mentioned something smart right there as well. When something along the lines of, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong environment. You always need to be surround
Totally
yourself with the
agree.
right people, that you can
Yeah.
level up to.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I remember early on when I was sitting on boards as my career was growing, every once in a while you'd have, someone in the room that was really quiet, the quietest person in the room. And I thought, well, initially I thought, well, they're not really contributing to the conversation. But then I soon realized the quietest person in the room is usually the smartest person in the room. And I'm quite verbose. And so I learned to kind of tap it down a bit. But yeah, exactly. If you're not putting yourself in an environment where, continuous learning happens, the status quo based on forward motion is you're actually going backwards.
I mean, you were also, I mean, you have now retired from that, but you said you were also teaching at the University of Washington, and you were teaching coursework in regards to the dynamics of successful and failed ventures. which I think is such an
Exactly.
interesting topic. Is there any sort of giveaways or any summary of strategies we can go through on this podcast?
Yeah, you bet. You bet. That whole thing came from my TEDx talk,
Mm.
which was 10 years ago. Yeah, the book led to an appointment at the University of Washington School of Business, which in the States is, one of the higher ranked universities. They're top 25 in the whole country. But the point is, they were buying my book for two of their marketing courses. And then they found out the publishing company, which we started and we own, were from Seattle. And so I got an invitation to guest lecture for a marketing research course. And I guest lectured for 3 times. And then the School of Business offered me an appointment. And that was in 2012. And I taught from 2013 to 2025. Like you said,
Yeah.
spring quarter, I retired. And, I've got a lot left in the tank. It's just I had other pursuits I wanted to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun. So that
I
was
can
kind of
imagine.
lucky. They were buying the book. The book did really well, especially in corporate and academia. I recently got a sizable order from a company that serves CEOs. And so anyway, yeah. And because of the corporate thing, we made it a hard
Oh, it's a hard copy now. Look at that.
it's a hard, yeah, we paid extra for the hardcover.
Yeah.
And I could have printed it in India for 20% the cost, but we're kind of a buy local agency. We have clients in all 4 time zones, but
Well,
the idea is we wanted it printed in the USA because it says that on the copyright page. And
yeah.
we just really wanted to walk our talk.
Amazing. So much educational value behind you, Andrew. Not only educating and teaching people, but also running a successful agency. You're sort of helping and returning back to the community. And I think it's incredible when universities have a speak person that actually has had a successful business, is still running an agency and can teach from his own experience rather than from the textbook. So that's what I felt really passionate about when you told me about it. I was like, wow, great. I wish I was there.
Well, thank you. And really feel like you can learn, if you're paying attention, you can learn more from failure than you can success. That's the whole point of one of the courses I taught. It was the most common course I taught. It was business consulting. And we used the McKinsey framework. They're probably the biggest consulting firm in the world. I think they're like in 60 countries, 30,000 employees, but they have an incredible framework, part of which, the best of the best we've adopted in our own framework. But the point is that we would take a look at this and, of that framework, and not even 10% of the class, and it's only allowed for seniors that are about ready to graduate, but only about 10% of the class had any interest at all in pursuing consulting as a business. Because at the bottom line, the big three or big four, however you break it down, it's about critical thinking and problem solving, at its root. And they use a technique that's called inductive thinking. And, 99% of business people use deductive thinking, right? Start with A, move to B, so on and so on. Inductive thinking is beginning the client project from a consultant's perspective at the end of the project with a hypothesis as to the solution. And then you go through the data gathering process to either prove or disprove the hypothesis. And even if you disprove your hypothesis, it's because you exposed the real solution. So it's a
Mm.
big time saver. So
It
that
sounds
was a real fun class.
Yeah, it sounds like it's sort of like how you deliver an offer to your client properly, so the message, lands to your client. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. Really, don't talk about features. Don't talk about your process. Don't talk about your tools or technology. Talk about the outcome.
Wow, this
What
is so
specifically is
powerful.
going to benefit the
Yeah,
client. And so, yeah, I think
because
that was a brilliant analogy.
yeah, because I mean, right now we're in this era where everyone's sort of calling themselves, "I'm an AI agency," and AI is a tool. End of the day, so you're promoting a tool rather than the outcome that you can get with the tool, which I think is so important. What you're saying right now, and I keep hearing this more and more with the research I do, that the outcome is the one that you should be presenting, not the tool. So
Absolutely.
very looking forward to reading your book and purchasing it because it's some very valuable information there.
Well, and I think that this goes to a problem a lot of, people that are in business development for their agencies. They lead with service first. Here is our toolkit. Here's what we're expert in. And I think that is completely backwards. I think you should lead with the problem first. Throw a few questions out there and shut up and listen and probe. Find out why you are even talking. What is the CEO or the owner's issue, and really understand their problem before you start explaining services and solutions.
Yeah, I keep hearing this.
In fact, if, talking about what you do that is aligned to and that gives you confidence into solving their problem is really the best way to go. And, don't get into all the details. Don't, give them a glimpse behind the curtain. Just really focus on, where they're at, what's their business situation, their goals, aspirations, and focus on that and talk about those outcomes.
I keep hearing this analogy where it's like you go to a doctor. They don't start straight away diagnosing you without knowing what you're going through, what symptoms you're experiencing, and then they diagnose, right? So it's a very similar scenario what you have with the business owner or potential client.
Brilliant. Could not agree more. In fact, we even use the doctor analogy and talk about, they're doing a diagnosis before they present a treatment plan, right? Well, the same should be true if you have a consulting, advertising, or marketing organization, is that you really need to diagnose. And of course, using or extending your doctor analogy is that they're actually running tests. They're gathering data. And from a marketing perspective, the data we're gathering isn't inside our patient's body. It's about our client's company. We gather 3 data sets. We do a very extensive discovery on our client, find out where they are, and we are looking at their business in a very different light than they are. I call it outsider insight. And the second data set is voice of the customer. It's a Six Sigma technique. I got certified in Six Sigma decades ago, and it was originally discovered by Motorola in the early 80s. And when I started reading about this voice of the customer method of gathering insights, I went, oh my gosh, this has a marketing application. And so that was the foundation of the system that we developed and trademarked, which is the content of the book.
Wow. And talking a little bit about your TEDx talk you had, you discussed a formula for breakthrough growth. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, you bet, because it's, the underpinning or the foundation of what we're talking about in terms of voice of the customer. So it's a simple math equation. Vision plus insight plus innovation are what lead to breakthrough growth. So, you can try to grow your business and incrementally eke out a single digit increase year over year, or you can be more focused on rapid scaling. And rapid scaling really requires competitive distinction. And the easiest way to do that is through innovating something to distinguish yourself from in your space, but that distinction is highly valued by your target market. Otherwise, it won't have a shelf life. So yeah, but it takes a vision. What's your aspiration? What does your preferred future look like? Articulate it. In corporate, we call it a vision statement. I really believe in that. And I call in the TEDx talk, I refer to that as your North Star. And then you gather data, you gather insights based on what it is you're trying to accomplish. Really taking a head out of the sand look at your business, the good, the bad, and the ugly, strengths, weaknesses. We always perform a SWOT and a PEST analysis with our clients to really get that data. And then given the fact that you're trying to innovate a solution that's highly valued by your target market, then that's where the voice of the customer comes in. But by itself, it's not enough. You also need to understand what your key direct competitors are doing, because if they are already doing what you're trying to innovate or solve for, it's not going to differentiate you, and that's not a strategy that'll work. And so that's where the insight comes in. And so you've got your North Star, you have the market intelligence, and those 2 data sets will help you brainstorm and narrow down and look for innovative ways to not only capture customers, but to really distinguish you. A goal we have at Marketing Solutions is now you see at the bottom of my screen, it says One Accord LLC. I am a principal of that company. It's a national consulting firm, but this is in the Marketing Solutions context of the book and all of that. The idea is that innovation should be generated by what the customers care about that differentiates your company. And I'm not talking about our typical R&D where you're building a widget or in a fairly lengthy developing curve, like say in manufacturing. It's really about a service or a process. We call it a system that leads to a better ROI.
And what would you say is the number one thing holding companies back from that breakthrough growth right now, in your
I
opinion?
just don't think they're gathering market intelligence, at least in my experience. And we're targeting a smaller, our target market, we're industry agnostic, but gross revenues range between 1 and 50 million. So we're kind of at the big end of small. We have worked for startups, but those are usually fairly well funded because, a research driven process, takes a bit of an investment, but it always pays off if the methodology is sound.
I am curious about your take on niching down, whether that's niching down for a specific industry that you serve or niching down for a specific service, because there's really sort of two ways you can niche down. What is your opinion about that? Do you think you need to differentiate yourself by niching down, or do you think a general approach is still going to work?
I think having a niche strategy both on the product and the market. So product innovation, market, the demand side of your equation, prospective clients. And so I think you need to do both. If you have two people that are being interviewed by a client that, let's just say, they want to grow, which is, not unusual, the specialist will always win out. As long as their specialty addresses the problem their company is trying to solve. In fact, I even talk about it in the book that specialists are able to differentiate themselves. And so I think it's at the beginning of the sales conversation or lead nurturing process, you need to have the top of the funnel is a lot wider. But then again, you're going problem first, you're dealing with your service. And then you can kind of customize your solution based on what you do to meet the client right where they're at. And that's what's going to generate a higher level of credibility. And it's one word in any service related industry that should be the aspiration. That one word is trust. You have to generate trust before a transaction or an engagement occurs.
This is going to be very interesting. How can you build trust through cold outbound to audiences that don't know anything about you? In your opinion, I know you work with inbound right now and you don't need to take that approach, but there's a lot of agencies that are actually struggling with this.
Right? No, I get it. So back to the distinction between inbound and outbound. Yes, if you're successful for a long period of time, the overwhelming majority of your new business will be inbound. And certainly that's a lot easier to deal with. With outbound, the mistake I see biz dev or small agency owners do when they're trying to connect with prospects is they literally try to sell. And so I do a lot of coaching, and we have a half-day sales course that I developed, I don't know, 30 years ago, and it has a lot of traction, especially in the B2B environment, because that's where traditional, mass marketing doesn't work. It's, ABM, account-based marketing, one-to-one, where you're customizing everything. But I see people try to sell. In that very first meeting, you shouldn't be selling anything. Everything you should be is about asking the prospective decision maker questions, finding out what their real issue is. And, if they say something and you jump right in, you're not going to generate trust or credibility. You're going to be perceived as there's, another person with something that they're trying to sell us. In the very first meeting, I only pay attention and ask questions about them. I don't talk about our agency or me at all. Now, what happens usually these are just 30-minute introduction Zooms, but in the last typically in the last half of those meetings, they start asking questions about me. And I will be able to um, share what we do and why it works. And the fact that we've run 500 companies through our map system, that all of a sudden that's how credibility happens. But those questions are generated by the prospect. They're not forced over by me. And when they're asking questions, and I've already found out what their aspirations are, what their challenges are, opportunities, not everything is a problem or a nightmare. About 25% of our clients come to us with an opportunity. Maybe they're launching a new SBU, a strategic business unit, or a new product launch or an extension of an existing product. And so those are opportunities. And so they have great opportunity. They're not trying to solve a problem. But I think that's the best approach in that initial meeting. Really focus on the prospect and and in the very rare occasion where the prospect won't ask me any questions, that's usually a telltale sign that this is not going to be a good fit. Or if I believe they are a good fit, based on, what they do, where they are in, their brand and product life cycle. And I think, oh, this is a good fit and they're not asking anything. I might just go, but Yolanta, based on what you shared with me, I think it's worth continuing the conversation. Would you be willing to reconnect for another 30-minute Zoom in a few weeks? And usually, I don't know, 8 times out of 10, the answer is yes. And the 2 times out of 10, the answer is no. I just saved myself from wasting a lot of time.
Wow, and that didn't seem very salesy at all. That was sort of like not much commitment. It's just another call, right? And I love the way you formed it as well. Very, very genuine, really good advice you just given as well from that initial meeting, how you should construct it in order to build that credibility. But first, you make it about them. Everyone loves stuff talking about them, right? So
Right.
you make it
It
about
also
them and their business.
separates you from the other people they're talking with. Often, if it's a larger company or a bigger project, and I shared our targets 1 to 50, we've had 3 Fortune 500 clients, and all but one of them came to us. One of them I was introduced to and I pursued because I thought it was a good fit. Anyway, the point is, if it is a larger, everybody's going after SMB, small, medium-sized business. Or in Europe, it's SME, small, medium-sized enterprise. I've got consultants, and we actually did some consulting for a company in Europe. It's got to be over 25 years ago. But the point is that you want, again, distinguish yourself. And if you're focused on them, it's going to separate you from the other people they're talking with. I mean, if they're talking about, a big $150,000 project, they're not just talking to one agency. They're talking likely to 3. And my goal as an agency owner is not to be on the shopping list. I already am. I want to be at the top of the shopping list. And I don't think you do that by leading with features and, hey, this is our widget and all of that. It's like, well, tell me about you. One thing I learned very early in my career was to have a servant's heart. And if you actually come at every interaction with a genuine desire to serve, to help, to solve problems, I think it makes a big difference. One of my favorite quotes was from Winston Churchill. I've got several. I mean, this is a coffee cup. Probably backwards on your screen, but it says
No, no,
never,
no, I get it. Yeah,
never, never give up.
yeah.
Winston Churchill. But to my favorite quote, he says, you make a living by what you get. You make a life by what you give. And I really believe in the
Ooh.
give to get philosophy. And it's worked really well for us for 28 years.
Yeah, it's like you help out even if you do something, even if you offer value, is they're gonna feel indebted to you. It's bound to come back, but obviously still have the main course of sort of helping, not to, get something out of it. I think it's a very, very good point you mentioned there. And also you talked about once you have the initial meeting, how really you should construct it and golden advice there. I'm sort of wondering if there's any more gems on how to actually get them on that meeting. You mentioned about trust, and they have nothing once you send that cold outreach message, for example. So how can you build trust? Is it maybe offering some value, some free value, maybe like a course that you did or a webinar? Is there any more gems you can give us there?
Well, a tool I use, if I think it's an excellent fit and it's really a client that I want to engage because, I'm 100% confident I can deliver value. And that's the deal. If you're not 100% confident you can deliver value, you're not going to end up at the top of the shopping list. But it's how you present that confidence that matters. If you come across as cocky or arrogant, you're done. It's really coming at that with the servant's heart. So back to, what a lot of people call freemiums, we do in our dance to engage and to nurture a new prospect. And obviously, we don't go through the 4 meeting dance until I've pre-qualified them. I have to know that they, really understand where they are and where they want to go. The second meeting is what we call an intake. It's called a client intake. And we send them a questionnaire. It's really short. It's only 11 questions, but the questions are very strategic based on what are our typical issues that the clients are dealing with. Define your current business situation. What are the strengths? What do you see as the weaknesses? What is what are your short and long range objectives? Who's your target market? But who talk a little bit about the saturation and the competitive landscape. And of course, we're always talking about timelines and budgets, right? If you were going to move forward with marketing solutions, when would you like to engage? I'm thinking, next year, or I'm thinking if it's next year, and this is great. Let's get together in 9 months and talk again and see if you're still in the same space and ready to move. I'm not going to put a proposal together for a
Yeah.
company that's not ready to move forward because there's commitment on my side, but
Yeah.
no commitment on their side. So that intake and that process and that conversation is what really leads to trust. It's about the questions that we ask, the probing. And usually that's when they start doing a deeper dive into what we do, how we do it, and how it might fit with their goals. And so at the end of that intake, which is usually pretty short, 30 to 45 minutes. We both have a pretty good idea if we want to continue the conversation. And usually that's 85% or better at that point because I've pre-qualified them. Not in a way that's obvious, not in a salesy way, but just, I'm kind of interested. How do you do, you said ABC, how do you deal with XYZ? And really just come to that first meeting with curiosity. But if we both feel it's a good fit after the intake, then we move on to proposal and so on.
I love
And the
that cycle
proposal
there.
is really focused on the intake so
Yeah.
that we are really addressing what it is they want to care about. Every once in a while, in fact, this recently happened. Our biggest client is in Florida. They're over 3,000 miles away from our office. We've never even met them, and we just went into our 5th year with them. Great client, absolutely love them. But they were referred to us 4.5 years ago by another client we had in Florida. Again, as far away in the United States as you can get from Seattle. A lot of people on the East Coast think that Seattle's still dealing with covered wagons. It's really kind of an interesting country dynamic. But they said, hey, we want you to do for us what you did for this other company. You did rapid scaling. They went from 1 to 10 million in a few years and do that. Can you do that for us? And I had worked in their industry and I said, absolutely. Been there, done that. And so we did the intake. And in the intake, I exposed something that I picked up on, but they didn't. And then we went to proposal because both sides were 100% confident we wanted to work together. And my proposal had nothing to do with growth. And the CEO stopped me 5 minutes in. He goes, wait, Ballard, hold on. This is not why we called you. We wanted a growth strategy. All you're talking about operational performance and optimization, all these kind of things. And another thing in sales is when somebody gives you an objective, don't jump into the answer. That makes you look weak. Pause for a minute and look at them and said, I'm really glad you brought that up. And I said, well, the fact is I could run you through a growth program, but I would just put you out of business. You're not ready to scale for these 3 reasons.
Wow.
And there was this long pause and the CEO said, okay, please continue. And a month later, they hired us and, we're in our 5th year. The point is that even if you think it's going to blow up a deal, you have to come at it with 100% honesty. I know this is where you want to be, but you're not ready there yet. We need to do these things first. And usually someone at a strategic level founder, CEO, non-owner CEO, they get it. They're not in those positions by accident unless they're pre-launch or very early stage.
Yeah, the 4 sort of steps you mentioned, I think align so well when you have those initial 4 questions, because from what I gather, it also shortens the sales cycle because you're not wasting your time on proposals with businesses that don't even wanna go forward.
Yeah.
Such
Those
a
4 meetings, those 4
yeah,
steps all happen in less than a month.
well, in less than a month even.
Yeah.
It sort of reminds me, I spoke to an agency owner before, and they've sort of been in the industry for a while too. And they have something called a chemistry meeting because they have come across clients that bring up red flags that working with them will be a pain in the butt. So basically, they have now this chemistry meeting where they see how they're going to work together, how they deal with conflict. Obviously, sometimes they just end up blaming the agency, right? That's the
Right.
first guys are gonna blame because you hire them. So, yeah, really reminded me of that. Is there any other steps that you have to make sure or maybe deal breakers actually for your potential clients that if they did that, you're like, "I'm not gonna be working with you, unfortunately."
So I love the chemistry meeting. I love it for 2 reasons. One, it's doing a deeper dive to make sure it is a good fit. Sometimes saying no is the best thing you can do. And I've learned that saying no actually increases your perceived value. You say yes to everything, and it actually has the opposite effect. We do the same thing. We don't call it chemistry, we call it a discovery meeting. But I love it. I'm a big fan. I'm a branding nerd. I love the axiom name it and claim it. It's
Yeah,
about
yeah.
owning it, right?
Mhm.
Put the TM on it. Doesn't cost you anything to TM it, to trademark it. Now, the R, that takes a little bit of money and a little bit of time. And if you're going national or if it's, a bigger deal, then you need to protect that intellectual property. But yeah, this chemistry, I think it's really about avoiding, like you said, nightmares. And it has to do with their decision making process. And, in our first pre podcast meeting, we talked about the function of onboarding and retaining a client. And this is where that comes in terms of onboarding, establishing credibility, and realizing that this prospect is not a good fit, either by temperament or maybe by talent or maybe by need. Maybe what you do as a service niche is not a good connection with their needs, in which case, in those instances, I will be very honest and I'll say, we don't delve into that, but I have a trusted advisor that does. Would you like me to connect you with them, via introduction? And so all I'm doing is increasing my level of credibility and trust. It's because I am making decisions based on what's best for them, not what's best for me.
Mhm.
Through this dance, whether it's discovery, R4 meeting process, or this chemistry thing, which I absolutely love, it gives you the information you need to say no when you should.
Talking back about that onboarding, previously, I believe you mentioned the onboarding really is the most vital part because it depends on how the retention is going to go with the client.
Absolutely. It's about level setting, and most importantly, it's about setting and managing expectations. In fact, if it's a very complex project, we had a government contract several years ago, and it was dealing with websites, API technologies, and integrating 3 different platforms. Very complex. I had a team of 6 working on that, and it was a $150,000 project. And 10 years ago, that'd be like, over 200,000 today. Big project, but there were so many complex moving parts. Agreement was twice as long as it normally was. And when it came to specific milestones and specific targets, we actually documented those. And I actually had the client, which was a state agency, initial each one of those. So they couldn't come back, weeks or months later. It was a 6-month project, months later, and say, wait a minute, that's not what I asked for. Well, it kind of is.
Yeah.
Is this
Very
your
important to
autograph or is it?
protect yourself as well
Oh,
as a
yeah.
business working with such huge projects.
Absolutely. So, yeah, so really it's about full disclosure and communications, and it's not about overselling what you're going to deliver. I believe you should undersell so you can over deliver.
Yes, I
I,
love
m- I
that.
mean, even at the small, we do a ton of strategic planning, and I probably facilitate 30 retreats a year. So it's something we do with great frequency. sometimes 3 or 4 a month. And I have to travel sometimes around the country to do this. But the point is that after we leave the 1 day or the 2 day offsite, um, if I know I can deliver the report on Wednesday the next week, I'll say, I'll have this to you by next Friday. Is that acceptable? 100% of the time, 99.9%, they say,
Yeah.
sure. Now, I already know I can deliver it on Wednesday. So when I deliver it on, I'm giving my margin that nobody else knows about. But when I deliver it
They
on
know now.
Wednesday, it's like, whoa, he got this to me 2 days early. So
Yeah.
she or he, whoever I report to, they're thinking like, whoa, they're kicking butt and taking names. They beat their own timeline.
I love that.
So it's
I was
about
yeah. I was sort of taking that approach, sort of under promise and over deliver. We do that with our clients, but it's like even like little tasks, like even about sending a report to them or anything else. You're right. You're sort of building yourself up to like you're eager and you deliver, rather than saying Wednesday, something happens because we can't control the future. And then you send it by Friday and then you lose that sort of credibility a little bit or that care that you have.
right. But if they didn't expect it till Friday, you gave yourself a 48-hour
Yes.
margin. Now,
Very smart.
sometimes real things happen. We've had a lot of severe winter storms here. Most of them were, I think, in December. This month has not been as bad. And we lost power, no internet, no computers, can't reach the network, can't reach the cloud. And in those cases, and they're rare, fortunately, it was a local client and they saw the news.
Mhm.
They knew we were in tough shape. So rarely do you have to ask for an extension on the timeline. But as long as the reason is legitimate and verified, you get a hall pass.
Yeah, of course. But you can only have so many hall passes, right? If you're already letting people down on
Touche.
little things.
Yeah, the more that you exercise that back pocket card, the less credibility you're going to have.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose the client. I was reading an article, this might have been a year or two ago.
Mhm.
This is specific to the advertising agency. And, you are beyond that. You're dealing with AI, you're dealing with lead gen, you're dealing with some really cool stuff. But with advertising agencies, I would consider you, a technology marketing machine. But with traditional ad agencies, they're developing a creative strategy, they're producing promotion, or they're managing channels, they're doing their analytics, whatever, that, a lot of those folks are really, they absolutely are over promising
Mhm.
and just to get the gig. But when the advertising stimulus doesn't drive the results, the false expectation that they set, the engagement's very short. So back to this article, I read that the average ad agency engagement in the United States, and I don't know if this holds true for Europe or the UK, was only 18 months. The agency would get fired after a year and a half.
Wow.
And our average is 7.5 years.
It's
And so
incredible.
obviously we come at this in a very, very different way.
Yeah, clearly. You're right. I think that's when you set the expectation too high and you can't deliver on that. That's when you're gonna churn a lot of clients, unfortunately. You're right. It's
Yeah.
just setting that expectation. And sometimes you're just trying to overpromise because you're trying to get a client through the door. But what is the point if you will damage the reputation of your business in the long run? It's not
Yeah.
worth it.
There won't be any inbound.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll be churning through outbound work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. It's tedious. Frankly, cold calling is difficult.
Mm,
Again, I
yeah.
really prefer the plausible cause. Also, one of the techniques I use in outbound sales really has to do with having somebody introduce me to somebody. One thing's great about LinkedIn is, if they're a second or a third level of connection, you can go through their list and find out if you have any first connections in common. And then I would reach out to the first connection. I'm pretty stingy about who I allow in. I get a dozen to
I can
15,
imagine.
even more connection requests a week. I accept 10% of them because most of them are trying to sell you something.
Mm, yeah.
So our LinkedIn connection list is vetted, if you will. So I can go to one of my first level and I'm saying, how well do you know so and so? Oh yeah, I know them. I mean, we meet at the same networking things. They're not a client. That do you know this person well enough where you'd feel comfortable doing an email introduction? And I'll even write the email introduction because I don't want you to be selling me.
Mhm.
I want you to say, hey, based on this situation, you may have an interest in talking with Andrew based on, what your company does. Has a revenue acceleration program, which is why I'm writing the email that you might be interested in. It, you know, doesn't cost you anything
Yeah,
to
yeah,
find out. He'll
yeah.
buy the virtual coffee.
Yeah, it's also sort of that returning back to the community, you help out somebody else, and that good's bound to come back to you as well, and I keep hearing this more and more, so it must be true.
I'll give you one other trick, another tool in my toolkit that works really well for outbound connections and marketing. And it's referral, establishing a referral network. Now, my view is that most people try to go an inch high and a mile wide. They're trying to get a gazillion people in that referral network with very low frequency of touch or connection. I think that's a waste of time. I go an inch wide and a mile deep. I have a much smaller network of referral partners, and I am meeting with them minimum every quarter just to stay on touch. And every once in a while, I might come up with an article that I think they might be interested in. No ask. I'll send them article. I read this in the McKinsey newsletter, and I thought of you. I thought you might find this
Yeah.
interesting. Again, give to get. Look
Mhm.
for opportunities to serve people. And then all of a sudden, I've got a really good trusted referral partner and a relationship manager at a bank here. And in the last 2 years, he has sent me 4 leads. 3 of them became contracts. So I'm
Wow.
taking this person out to lunch with great
Yeah.
frequency.
Oh, that's
So
great.
inch wide, L deep.
Yeah. There's a lot of wisdom to take away from you for sure, Andrew. Thank you so much for taking the time to put your value out there. If people wanted to connect with you, find out more about your services, where could they find you?
So if they went, the easiest thing is, go online, open your browser and type in Now, I don't know if this is true in the UK, and I always do the initial meeting, a 30-minute free consult. But in the States, you can type Andrew Ballard, marketing solutions, and I'm always at the top of the page.
Okay. Shall we test that
So
theory out or somebody from the audience? That
well,
would be
and so
great.
I'll just give you my LinkedIn profile
Yeah,
because it's
just in
easy to
case, of
remember.
course.
So it's at Andrew Ballard, the numeral one. And that's it.
Okay.
I was one of the early LinkedIn adopters. And there was one Andrew Ballard that got in there before I did.
Yeah,
But yeah,
unfortunately.
Andrew Ballard, numeral
Mhm.
one. And that's my LinkedIn handle.
Awesome. Appreciate your time, Andrew, and your value and your golden nuggets of wisdom. All the links you mentioned, I'll put them down below so people can locate you easily.
Great. Yolanta, it was such an honor. Thank you for reaching out, and I really enjoyed it. Have a
Yeah.
have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye bye.